Good morning, guys. Just a quick video today, and this will be the last thing I post this week. Tomorrow, Friday, is just going to be a makeup day in class, and so students will be working on any assignments they're late on. I would invite you to do the same at home. I'm trying to get all the grades updated by tomorrow, so check your grade and see if there's anything that's missing or that you got low scores on. You can rework it. You can submit anything that's late, but work on that tomorrow. Now today, just some quick stuff. First of all, make sure that you've taken the quiz from a couple days ago. It was quiz 3. Make sure you've done that. Make sure that you did the reading assignment we did yesterday. That was on evolution. And make sure you've caught up on all the notes and video lectures. I've posted several in the last 2 weeks. I put up quite a bit of material about heredity, Punnett squares, incomplete dominance, and reproduction. So we're just going to add just really quickly to reproduction today. So if you remember from the last video, and if you haven't watched it, go back and watch it and get the notes on reproduction. But reproduction, there's 2 forms of ways that organisms reproduce: sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. The main difference was that in sexual reproduction, there are 2 parents, and each parent shares some DNA to the offspring. That means that the offspring has a combination of traits from mom and dad, or from the 2 parents. And this could be plants, it could be animals, or people. Whereas asexual reproduction, there's only 1 parent. This is more like a bacteria dividing into 2 bacteria. And when they do that, the offspring have the identical DNA as the original parent, and they're identical to each other. So today in class, we're doing a lab, and I'm not going to have you do this lab at home, but I want you to get the main idea here. The lab would be that we have some cereal pieces, and we would multiply them in the respective ways. So for example, we'd have some Cheerios, and we'd have Cheerios so they're all the same, right? And you start with 1. And that 1 Cheerio undergoes asexual reproduction. That's like a bacteria or something, and it splits into 2. Okay? And so those 2 offspring, if you look at their DNA, they would have the same DNA as the parent. And then those 2 would split and become 4. And then those would split and become 8, etc., etc. So you'd have 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, and it's going to keep on going and going. And so these multiply very quickly, and that's true of asexual reproduction. Now, sexual reproduction, on the other hand, is a bit slower. Instead of 1 dividing into 2 and then into 4 and then into 8, you have to have 2 organisms. And maybe these 2 organisms will reproduce and have 1 child. Maybe they'll have more. Maybe kittens have several or something. Cats have several. But in many cases, there's 2 parents and they produce 1 offspring. Okay, so now they have to bring in another one, and those will produce 1 offspring. So there's 2, and then there's 3, and then maybe there's 4, and then there's 5, and then maybe there's 6 or 7, right? It takes a while for these guys to reproduce. It's a much slower process. It's not just splitting into 2, boom, you're done. You have to grow the baby. You have to have 2 parents to make 1 or 2 offspring. And so it takes a lot longer for the population to grow. That asexual population could easily reach 500 individuals, whereas this population maybe only got to 30. Not nearly as many in the same amount of time. But there are some advantages to both forms. So I need you to add this to your notes. So advantages. These are the things that are good. Add this, please, to your reproduction notes. I'm just going to write it on the board today. For asexual reproduction, the advantage is that they reproduce quickly. So they can build their population really fast. And if something happens to the population, if they get hurt and a lot of them die, they can rebuild it really quickly. Okay, reproduce quickly, build population quickly. Okay, now sexual reproduction, on the other hand, they are much slower. It takes a lot longer. They don't have that advantage. It takes a long time. If something happens to the population, if a big population of humans were to get wiped out by a disease, it would take a long time for humans to rebuild the population. It's not nearly as fast, so that's a disadvantage. But the advantage is that sexual reproduction produces variety, which protects against disease, predators, etc. Okay, so add that to your notes. You can pause the video. But what we would do in the lab is we would have these, instead of Cheerios for the asexual group, for the sexual group, we would have Fruit Loops. Now, Fruit Loops would have different colors, right? And you get a lot of different offspring with different colors in there, which is a lot of variety. Now, all that variety means that if something comes in, a disease that comes in and it attacks them, it maybe only wipes out the purple ones. The other ones are immune to that disease because there's all this variety, because you've mixed and matched all this DNA. And so there's all this difference in the DNA that protects against disease and predators and things. Maybe white rabbits blend in better than brown rabbits, and so they survive better. That protects against predators. Now, asexual, if you have all those bacteria, they all have the same DNA. So if a disease comes in and affects one of them, it's going to affect all of them. So it can wipe out the whole population or a large portion of it. But again, they can rebuild quickly. So those are the main advantages. These can build their population quickly. And if it's a sexual reproducer, well, it's slower, but they're more protected against diseases and things because there's all this variety in there in their DNA. It's not all the same DNA. That's essentially what our lab would teach us if you were here in class. So get that in your notes, okay? And make sure you've caught up on everything else for this week. And I will see you guys next week online if you're learning from home. Thanks.